So maybe like almost going back to the beginning again, we started with the bank's thought process. Now, my view, and I think it's our view at Ozone API, is I think this creates a real opportunity to completely transform the bank's business model. It's no longer about the customer always having to come to the bank and only being able to access whichever products the bank has. It's more about actually financial services players can be more of an orchestrator of people's lives. They can provide certain products and services themselves. They can help them see their entire financial services picture, and they can embed what they do wherever their customers are. Back to the bridges analogy. Do you think banks are they getting that yet? Are they changing the business model to reflect they're operating in an open ecosystem rather than a closed vault? Or do you think they're all at slightly different places on the journey?
I think they're probably all at slightly different places. I mean, when I look back over my lifetime, banks, when I was growing up, I think, were very paternalistic. I mean, not just when I was growing up as a child, but in the beginning of my career, so we're not talking forever ago, very paternalistic. You come to me and I'll tell you what you can do and what, etc. And people sort of accepted that. And I think that, I like...
Well, you had to put your suit on to go and see the bank manager.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and Richard Branson famously didn't. And, it became part of a story that he went to see Coots for a loan in his jeans and they tried to throw him out. But, and that was a big thing to talk about, to exactly your point. So I think the culture of banking has changed in the last 30 years, definitely. But I think that what we're talking about is moving from paternalism to service. Huge difference, I think. Although I think we're making good strides. Although I did read, where did I read it? It might have been in the Sunday Times or something, that somebody had complained, I won't tell you about which insurance company, where they'd put in savings years ago, £15,000, it had turned into £45,000 and they needed it for some building work that they were having done. And they'd had to complain to the paper because this institution would not pay them their own money. And I was quite shocked to read that literally 2 days ago. And so I would say that, and of course, that now that the Sunday Times have got involved, their money is being paid, etc., and we always see that. And, they're the one case that proves or disproves the rule, I guess. But I do think that we've moved a long way from paternalism. I don't think we've quite moved yet to a model of service, and I think that it's the service model that I'll be really thrilled with by the end of my career. I reckon that, the new financial services companies really think about how to serve their customers first and foremost with data that belongs to the customer, where the bank's objective is for the customer to be better off at all times and not ripped off. That will feel like a massive cultural change over one lifetime, and I'll be thrilled with that.
And you mentioned a really important point earlier as well, that actually they don't have to build all of the products themselves now.
Yeah,
they can orchestrate and pull the right things together. I mean, a lot of my banking career, it was big focus on being the universal bank. Being able to do everything for retail, SME, corporate, and
build
the entire product suite, all built in-house. And I think, parallel I always look to is Amazon, I guess one of the biggest retailers in the world now, but way more than half of the stuff they sell isn't their own stock. They've just created this incredible marketplace where whatever you want you can find, but they'll manage certain inventory and they'll create an environment for someone else to sell the rest, and works well. And I think banks are starting to build more into their own digital channel. But I think some banks are moving faster in terms of, wanting to be, again, something I heard just this morning actually was, a few years ago, the focus was always about being the primary bank. That meant where the salary goes. But actually, maybe now it's more about being the center of a customer's orchestration. If you're the one that helps the customer manage their money, whether it's in your product or not, it's a really powerful place to be.
Yeah, really powerful. So what do I think? So I think, obviously we haven't talked enough probably about Revolut and Monzo and Starling, for example, as examples of new banks. I think they can always thought about the customer at the very heart of what they do. I think it's really important to temper that by understanding, and I'm not suggesting they don't, but, lots of fintechs, in my experience, have perhaps focused more on the tech than the fin, and managing a bank is a really difficult thing to do. And so we need to get this balance right between managing a safe, secure bank with a solid balance sheet and one that provides digital technology and capability to service customers, I think. And if you can get that right, I think that's super important. One of the big changes that happened to banking in, again, my career, which might have been around the year 2000, something like that, perhaps a bit later, was regulators banning charging for current accounts. Do you remember?
Yes, yeah, I do.
And of course, the reason for that was it was a massive rip-off. Banks were making an absolute fortune, and customers never really knew that until it was exposed by the media, and banks went mad because they said, how are we ever going to survive? You have to charge for current account banking. But actually, because of all of the noise and the unfairness that was sort of demonstrated through the system, I don't think many current accounts, you can't charge for a current account anymore, at least not for a very long time, of banks being able to charge for current accounts. In my view, access to data will be something similar. At some point there's going to be a big push, I think, by the media, by customers or whatever, saying, you know what, it's my data and I want it to be used for me. And I suspect that at that point, that will become the tipping point where banks move from, old-fashioned paternalism to proper customer service. And as I say, the reason I'm excited by open banking is I think that this is one of the things that will encourage that tip.
And that's, again, back to a point we raised earlier. So JP Morgan's move last year, I noticed a very, very obvious shift in the industry. All of a sudden, every conversation I went to, banks and the industry were wanting to talk about commercialization. We wrote a piece just before Christmas. Personally, I think there's a very clear commercialization model for banks around the open APIs they expose. I think there will be an element that should just be free access to what might be a data right. And often that's enshrined in the regulatory framework, but certain information needs to be accessible so the customer can give consent for it to be shared to other platforms that they're using. I think beyond that, there's then three very clear models. So one is there may be areas where banks can charge. On the data side, that might be giving more access than the regulatory requirement, removing any throttles. It might be about enriching it and turning it into something that's much more valuable to the third party. Banks have got a huge amount of identity information, and their customers may trust banks to say, can you confirm I am who I say I am, without all my data being shared with another third party. That's a great business model for the banks because they have to invest a huge amount in this, but they've got a lot of data that they could turn into more valuable components that third parties would buy. There's premium APIs in the payment space as well. So money movement comes with risk, it comes with cost, and creating the right commercial models around open banking payments, which we're starting to see, I think makes it a much more sustainable channel. So I think there'll always be some free access. I think there'll be a series of paid for APIs. The bit that I think is really the key for banks is then how do they make sure the APIs they expose allow their core products and services to be embedded wherever their customer is. So we as a business use an accounting platform. Within that, there's an awful lot of logic and analysis, and our CFO is continually looking at kind of how we manage our payables, receivables. But if a bank can embed products and services, so at the exact moment a business realizes, I could do with a bit of credit for a while, they're there, it becomes a really powerful channel. And we're seeing some of the open banking standards now evolve to cover what's been called service initiation, but effectively things like account opening, origination, credit origination. Yeah. That's the bridges we talked about before. I think if banks get that right, there's the potential that all of a sudden this becomes the biggest sales channel. Rather than needing a customer to come to your branch or your mobile app, your products can be wherever they are. I'm just not seeing many of them do it yet. So I'm hoping this is the year we start to see that shift. We're seeing some banks ask us to implement it with them, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm a banker, right? And so I'm naturally on the side of the banks in some ways. And I say that because of what I'm about to say, which is let's not feel sorry for them. They make a lot of money, right? Yeah. Banks make a lot of money. There's talk all around the world, including in the UK, about bank tax, on banks' profits. And, those sort of interventions, regardless of what you think about them, I think will encourage decision makers in banks to think about different business models, whether those models can be, if you like, more fair, more balanced, more sustainable. And I suspect, to your point, as that infrastructure, as the system around banks, by necessity, I suspect changes, then I imagine we get to a point where they're looking for new profit streams. And as you say, this is a good place to do that.
Well, I think that's and it's actually fundamentally it's a distribution channel for their existing products and services if they get it right. And there are some banks who are really leading the charge in this. But I don't think it's going to be too long till this becomes much more the norm. And there's equal investment in the API channel as there is in the branch channel or their mobile app, and the kind of the owned channels.
I agree. I mean, the thing is change. We absorb change, don't we? Sometimes without noticing it. When I think back, I don't know why you've just made me think about checkbooks. Have you seen a check lately? I don't think I've seen a check for years.
Thankfully, I've not used one for a very long time.
No. I mean, I've a checkbook for donkey's years.
I had a mobile butcher in the village I used to live in where you had to pay for checks.
Yeah.
But I think I wrote about 5 checks in a period of about 5 years, and it was all just to one mobile butcher.
But it used to be, a big thing. And so we've moved on from that. And I suspect that this is part of moving on again to, a new way of making payments and a new way of growing the banking system. Yeah.
So I guess final question. It's obviously impossible to look too far forward, particularly with the amount of technological change, geopolitical change that we're going through. What would you love to see in terms of the next market evolution in the next 18 to 24 months? No further out than that.
Well, I think I'm slightly repeating myself in a sense. I think I would really like to see all of the banks taking to heart this point about making sure that customers' data is used for their benefit, whatever that means. So that means developing the payment system, I think, in that way, helping customers to manage their own financial position to optimal benefit for them, and to the extent that customers want it, making that data available to other organisations like Snoop and many others that can use that data for customers to be better off. And so I do think that we need to be in a place where in the future banks' data is, accurate, accessible, clean, relevant, and available to customers to use to improve their financial position. And I think that open banking, open finance is very much part of the way to get there.